Hey, what's up, my people? John Middlekauff, new YouTube channel. What I need you to do, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Appreciate everyone that has. It's the podcast, 3 and Out. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We got you covered. Also, thevolume.com. We got merch right here. FlexFit hat. Go to thevolume.com. Get yourself a 3 and Out hat. Okay, we got a lot going on football-wise. Washington hires Bob Myers and Rick Spielman. Atlanta blows out their coach since I talked last, officially. Carolina fired their general manager. That's a shocker. He was standing right there when Tepper threw the vodka soda at the fan in Jacksonville. Mike Vrabel situation's heating up. So's Belichick. Also wanted to hit on a couple, playoff games. We have some massive injuries that are pending right now. Something really quick on the draft because we know the order's out. And Tiger Woods no longer with Nike. But a lot of football stuff going on. We will hit on it all. But first, you guys have a smartphone? Do you have an iPad? Go to your app store. Download a little app that happens to be the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. And when you download the Game Time app, you can go to any game you want. You want to go to a playoff game? You live in the Michigan area? You want to go watch the Lions? Sunday Night Football against Matt Stafford? You live in Dallas? You want to watch Dallas? Are you a Packer fan? You live in the Southwest? Want to go see the Packers? Right? I got you covered. Game Time, promo code John. You go on the Game Time app. You search the event you want to go to, concerts, comedy shows as well. Go see Cat Williams next time he's performing. See, he went pretty viral last week. Like 30 million views out of old Shay Shay. And you can search by the venue, the price point, the view. It gives you an interactive view on the map. Cannot recommend them enough. I've been to hockey games. I've been to a baseball game. I've been to concerts because of my friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Buy the pair of tickets you want. Promo code John. John. $20 off. Can't recommend them enough. Okay, let's start with the old Commanders. I've said forever, I do think it's a little bizarre that the Sixers owns a football team in the Eagles division. Now, I've said forever, I don't think he could have pulled off being the Cowboys or the Giants owner. That wouldn't have been tolerated. Partly because Washington has been so out of sight, out of mind. They have been such an embarrassment for decades. I mean, the Eagles traded one of their best players in franchise history to the Washington, at the time they were the Redskins, in Donovan McNabb. Like, you take him. They would never have traded Donovan to the Giants or the Cowboys. I don't care how bad he was at the time. It's a little bizarre. But it does give you some insight into how this Josh Harris is going to think. And he was obviously famously behind the tankathon with Sam Hinkie. But over the last, since they, got capable players, starting with Joel Embiid, he's hired real coaches. Doc Rivers, NBA champion, winner. Nick Nurse, NBA champion, winner. Those have been his last 2 coaches. And his last 2 GMs, one a Colangelo, didn't end great, but had a resume in the NBA. And obviously Daryl Morey, who has some flaws, but he's a real high-end NBA general manager. So he is going to go big game hunting. Today, the report was Bob Myers and Rick Spielman have joined forces to help run this search. And I want to start with Bob Myers. It's a little weird. Wait, you're hiring the guy that used to be the general manager of the Warriors? Now, listen, I've, indirectly talked to Bob a couple times. I don't know him personally, but I know a lot about him. And I think Bob is one of those guys who, no matter what industry he went into, he would have been successful. If he went into finance, he would have ran a hedge fund or ran a bank. If he went into politics, he would have won and he would be in an office somewhere. As a senator, as whatever he would have done. There's nothing he has put his mind to that he hasn't been successful at. Played at UCLA, walk on, won a national championship. The guy has been consistently a part of winning. And then he became an agent for Arn Tellem that had all the best NBA players. When he transitioned into the NBA as a GM, he obviously was a major key into the Warriors dynasty. Not just making moves like adding Andre Iguodala or adding Kevin Durant, but running an operation that was not easy. He worked for a guy in Joe Lacob who I'm not comparing these guys in terms of their knowledge for their sport, but their just daily intensity has like a little Al Davis in the 80s, George Steinbrenner in the 90s to him. Not an easy place to work. A big reason I think Bob got tired of it. And Bob's one of those guys who probably gets bored, needs a new challenge. But when it comes to football, do you know who Bob's or one of his really good friends in the Bay Area that kind of became very close over the last, I would say, half decade? John Lynch. You know why? Him and John Lynch have a lot in common. Both guys that could do anything they wanted. Obviously, John athletically was a better player. He played in the pros. Bob did not play in the NBA. But in terms of anything they want to put their mind to outside of sports, they could have done. And anything in sports, they can do. Bob Myers is a deal maker. He gets along very well with important people. And when you run one of these searches for a coach, for a GM, it's all about having the decision makers and being able to get inside with them and figure out it's going to cost this. Who do we want this guy? And I'm telling you, he might not be an NFL guy. I would want Bob Myers associated with my operation, whether he ran an NFL team, whether it was an NHL team, or whether I was trading stocks. Bob Myers to me he's just successful in whatever he does. Now, I wouldn't ask him to run my NFL team. I wouldn't want him to be the GM of the NFL team, but I think he could transition pretty easily to the NFL. And it would not shock me if Bob kind of got bored a little bit with basketball and wanted a new challenge. And I'm not saying he's going to end up being the GM or the team president, but I would bet the reason he's a part of this is because Josh Harris saw how impressive this guy is. And I think his greatest strength is being able to deal with agents. And I got news for you. In 2024, agents control the coaches now too. Some of these stories I hear with NIL when it comes to coaches and feeding players to different agents is pretty nuts. Probably get into that this offseason. But I think a lot of people kind of shook their head because it's the first reaction anytime you do something different. I think the Bob Myers thing makes a lot of sense. I think Rick Spielman makes a ton of sense. He's worked in the NFL for decades. One, he was just a really good GM for the Minnesota Vikings. Look how many good players he drafted. Countless NFL Pro Bowl players. He was a big reason they signed Kirk Cousins. He hired Mike Zimmer once upon a time, who was he was kind of like a Bruce Arians type. Wasn't a guy going to get a lot of run, and he did it. And up until it ended pretty ugly, like it was pretty a lucrative partnership. If I was Washington and Bob Myers and Josh Harris, I would contemplate hiring Rick Spielman as my general manager. I thought the moment he got fired, I think he's pretty good. I think Rick Spielman deserves a second opportunity. Now, maybe he doesn't even want that. Maybe he's still getting paid. Maybe he just kind of wants to dip his toe in. But to me, Rick Spielman is a real NFL guy. He's a real human being that can become a general manager for your operation. So, little different tactic here for Washington. Remember a couple years ago, the Bears went on a search. And listen, this guy's in the Hall of Fame. He's an all-time great. They had Bill Polian, who's 80 years old, lead the search. I'm sorry, it's 2024. Need some younger blood that kind of know what they're doing. They can take on the modern economics and the modern landscape of the sport. So I was pretty impressed when the story broke that these are the two guys helping Josh Harris run the operation. And I would expect them to go big game hunting. Because when you look at Bob Myers, well, what did he do? They landed Steve Kerr. They landed Kevin Durant. They're not fucking around. It's not what he's used to. When he was an agent, they were going after all the big fish, the best players in the NBA. And Spielman has just proved he knows what he's doing when he's looking at coaches, and he knows what he's doing when he's looking at players. So if I was Josh Harris, I would want Rick Spielman around in some capacity, even if he doesn't become my GM, and just moving forward part of the operation. Atlanta. I think it's pretty clear now. I made a lot of fun of Arthur Smith for the blow up with Dennis Allen, and rightfully so. I think it's embarrassing anytime you complain about getting scored on. But I do think that was indicative of the pressure he was feeling about to be fired. And anytime you think you're going to be fired, even if you're ready to leave, even if you're over the job, any ambitious person has pride. So it hurts when you're told you're not good enough, pack up your shit and leave. even if they owe you $20 million. It sucks. And I think you saw a guy who had a meltdown, which, in football, it's like, bro, keep your shit together. Somewhat, I guess, understandable if you just put yourself in his shoes, knowing that when you flew home from New Orleans and landed in Atlanta, Arthur Smith called a meeting and fired you. So it sucks. Like, no one wants to get fired, right? But Atlanta had to do that. They had won 3 straight years of 7 games. This guy was not a head coach. I've been saying forever, there's nothing wrong with being a number 2 in the NFL. Arthur Smith proved to be an unreal offensive coordinator. When he had to motivate the team, when he had to run the coaches, when he had to run the entire operation, he was overwhelmed. And the offense suffered. But I saw him as an offensive coordinator for Mike Vrabel. He was really good. And I think the same thing about Dennis Allen. I think the same thing about Todd Bowles. We saw it with Vic Fangio. Some guys are destined to be number 2s. In the NFL, in that industry, it pays like $3-4 million. Who cares? Hell, the SEC is paying defensive coordinators $2.5 million. The money's enormous. This is Wall Street on grass or turf. Not turf for long, but turf and grass right now. To me, Atlanta, there have been a lot of stories that, like, keep an eye on Arthur Blank, who's 81 years old, clearly not getting any younger, how many years he's got left, to be in the Bill Belichick sweepstakes whenever, if ever, Bill Belichick comes around. To me, if I'm Arthur Smith, they haven't officially fired the GM, he gots to go too. Like, I'm doing what Washington's going to do, what Carolina did. I'm blowing every fucking guy out. We are starting from scratch because, one, we have a lot of assets on the team. We don't have a very good team. And to me, Arthur Smith deserved to be fired just from the simple fact of you came into a season and Desmond Ridder was your starting quarterback. It's inexcusable. It can't happen. That's a fireable offense in itself. Getting worked by Dennis Allen, getting worked by the Chicago Bears was a nail in the coffin. But Arthur Smith will be fine. If Vrabel goes somewhere, I would imagine one of his first calls is Arthur Smith to be his offensive coordinator. So I would expect Atlanta, just like Washington, to be sniffing after the big names with a legit resume. To me, when you say big name, sometimes has a negative connotation. There's something different, like big name who's good at his job. And I think either if they hired, if Mike Vrabel and Arthur Smith, obviously that wouldn't happen in Atlanta, but if Washington did that, Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, that would be a huge coup for these organizations that have been going nowhere and nowhere fast. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer to help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook now and use code JOHN. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN, John. The crown is yours. Carolina. The moment that visual went viral of Tepper throwing the drink and Scott Federer just didn't budge, like, yeah, he's probably done too. And he was fired this morning. And listen, Dave Tepper was never going to blame himself for the Bryce Young trade, which, let's face it, looks like an utter disaster. Now, it's only a year in, but if you could do a redo if you were them, I got news for you. They'd do a redo. They just would have taken C.J. Stroud. The other thing as part of that trade is the Bears wanted 3 guys. They wanted, if you weren't going to give us the max amount of first-round picks that we wanted, you had to include one of the players. Derek Brown, Brian Burns, and DJ Moore. Well, their big thing was, it's harder to find defensive linemen, so take DJ Moore. Well, you're taking a quarterback. Don't you want to keep your wide receiver who's a really good player and who's under a cheap second contract? Clearly, you're not acting like Brian Burns is the next Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, or, Nick Bosa, because you haven't extended him yet. So you should have traded Brian Burns, kept DJ Moore with your young quarterback. That was a debacle. And I'm putting that one on the general manager. And you can say, Middlekauff, well, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback as we sit here in January, 10 months later. Well, yeah, it's their job to get that right. When you're the GM and you're deciding, you have to get that right. And I watched them talk about it. They wanted to keep the defensive lineman. And that was a major, major mistake. Really was. So you could fire him off that move alone. Because the quarterback, part of the reason he was so embarrassing, the scheme, the coaching, didn't have anyone to throw to. Well, you had a fucking guy on the roster who was really good. Who's like, 90% of Deebo Samuel, who's under contract. So that was, to me, the move that as the season went on, I bet Tepper never shook that one. Now, clearly, Josh Harris, like, guys clearly like working for him. It's been pretty fruitful with the Sixers, right? We have an example of these guys go in there and have success. I know they haven't made it past the second round, but it seems like Doc Rivers like working there, Nick Nurse, Daryl Morey, Joel Embiid. Like, it's a pretty healthy environment. So I would bet on the Commanders moving forward to be completely different than the Dan Snyder operation, which was the laughingstock of the league. Atlanta, it's a city a lot of people want to live in. And guess what? Their owner has buku bucks. They're going to be in the mix for some stuff. Carolina, to me, is a major wild card. Their owner is a Looney Tune, right? Super rich guy, super successful in the finance market, but in terms of owning a team, has been an insane man with an unlimited amount of money. Sometimes if you're an insane man like Al Davis, back in the day, he didn't have as much capital. So, it was harder for him to do crazy things. He probably wanted to do 50 more crazy things than he actually did, but he didn't have the money to do it. This guy at any moment can just change his mind, pay you to go away, just do whatever he wants because he has so much cash. So I think David Tepper is probably one of the biggest red flags in the league as just someone to go work for. The Mike Vrabel situation, I think it's pretty clear that Mike Vrabel is not comfortable with the way things are set up there. And sometimes in life, you got to shut your mouth, right? And usually that's when you don't have options. Pat McAfee talked a bunch of shit about an ESPN executive last week. He doubled down on it today. You know why? Pat McAfee has options. He didn't need these guys. He took their money, but he was making a ton of money without them. If they fired him tomorrow, he'd continue to make a ton of money. He does not need any of these people. So he can talk like that. It's why most of the media is so uncomfortable. He's like, I can't believe he's doing this. Yeah, he's not like you. he's not intimidated about losing his gig. He does not care. If he had to, it's obviously ESPN has been fruitful for his operation. When I go to the gym, it's on every TV. That would not have been the case if he was only on YouTube. But he was making millions of dollars without ESPN. He might make a little more now, but he would have been fine. He was already rich, right? Anytime that you have leverage in the sense of you don't need somebody, it empowers you, right? Like, he's been in the trenches as an entrepreneur. And that ESPN is used to having just people fall in line and be their sheep. Well, he's not. And it's no different with coaches. Arthur Smith, if he wanted to keep his job, he probably had to kiss Arthur Blank's ass all year long. You know who doesn't need to kiss your ass? Belichick, as he starts winning Super Bowls. Mike Vrabel right now, he knows he would have options. So he doesn't need to beg for the job. He can go, and I don't know all the details. They're kind of, it's just pretty clear patching together the reports. Like, maybe he's not cool with the GM. I didn't hire this guy. I don't want to work with him. Maybe I don't think he's any good. Maybe I'm not cool with the president ownership structure. And he could go say his piece. I want this, this, and that. And if they go, well, we're only giving you half of that, he'll say, okay, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here. And if a guy doesn't want to be there, you don't want him there either. So he's got leverage because if he's available, a ton of people are going to want him. So Mike Vrabel, what I appreciate is clearly he's going to get to the point where he's going to draw a line in the sand. You're either going to do what I want you to do or not. And then if they do capitulate and give him everything he wants, then it's on him. It's like, okay, see what you got. And if they don't, I would imagine he's saying, I don't want to be there anymore. And then I do think a lot of these teams would be all over the guy. And I think Mike Vrabel's pretty good. I watched him yesterday going out, just like, I'm going to kick the living crap out of Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. And he did. Beat the living piss out of him. With an old Derrick Henry, which pretty cool moment, obviously going out with a $150. And I saw this viral clip of him thanking all the cooks and the equipment guys, clearly just a high-level guy, and Ryan Tannehill. And we're going to embarrass you. And you guys, like us, your season's about to end right here in Nashville. So Mike Vrabel's got options. Anytime you got options, you can act a little different, right? And I appreciate that about people. Because sometimes, why? I'm just going to kiss this guy's ass because that's what I should be doing. I can't stand this guy. I don't want to work with him, right? Pat McAfee, we just seen him do it if you're following him online, right? Mike Vrabel, it's different as a coach. You got to be careful. I bet, he snapped at a reporter last week. I just think he's kind of fed up with whatever their situation is there. And I would expect it to come to a head here very, very quickly. The Belichick thing, it clearly feels like it's over. And everyone has reiterated this point. Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, even though Jonathan, it doesn't feel like, at least from my vantage point, ever speaks, Robert does, has been given ample opportunity to come out and say, Bill's going nowhere. We got some stuff to figure out this offseason. Bill Belichick is going to be the coach in 2024. We're standing by our guy. We've stood by him for 25 years. He's going to be here next year. We're going to figure some stuff out, maybe add a GM, maybe do something, but we're going to work with Bill. They haven't done any of that. There's been no support. And listen, sometimes you come out in public support, like this guy's going to continue to be our coach and he still gets fired. That happens a lot in the history of sports. Kraft said nothing. And sometimes silence is obviously not ideal. And I think this is very, very difficult for this to end because of the history, because of the equity he has built up in the area. Because clearly he's not just some, like some of these guys have no business being head coaches. Bill is an elite leader / defensive guy. Offense is a problem. And his offensive coordinator is very, very important. He needs to get Josh back wherever he goes. But I would expect, I don't know the timeline, but I think it's pretty clear that Bill Belichick it'd be a huge upset if Bill is the coach in New England. And if I'm the Crafts, like it's time. There's nothing wrong. Like some divorces are meant to happen and everyone benefits. He gets remarried, she gets remarried, the kids are happy, it's fine. Some divorces are ugly. Some divorces suck. This feels like it's just one of those. Now, it might suck because Bill is petty, he's old school, he's curmudgeon-y, he's not going to take it well, which I don't blame him. But in some divorces, like Andy Reid, he got fired. He addressed the entire organization in Philadelphia in the cafeteria. I remember. So it's like everyone's a little different. And this one, it's sad because it shouldn't be as ugly, but probably will be. And I'm not going to get into every coach so far, teams that have extended. We want to interview this guy. We want to interview that guy. Because it's pretty clear that a lot of coordinators get interviewed. Obviously, the former head coaches, the big name guys. I do, from personal experience, can say I think Adam Peters is easily the best general manager candidate on the open market. And it shows you, like, he didn't get the Carolina job a couple years ago. Wanted it. Tried to get it. They went with Fitterer. So sometimes in life, when you want something professionally and it doesn't go your way, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Here's what Adam Peters did. He played at UCLA. He became, started at the ground floor with like the Josh McDaniels, Patricia crew in personnel in New England, worked his way up, saw multiple championships in the first Brady era with Vrabel and those guys. Then in the late 2000s, went with John Elway, or 2010 or whatever the specific year, to the Denver Broncos, was a part of that Peyton Manning run, won a Super Bowl there. And then John Lynch's first hire in 2017 was Adam Peters. So this entire Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch run, Adam Peters has been there. They haven't won a Super Bowl yet, but they've obviously had some elite teams. So Bill Belichick, New England Patriots, Super Bowl. John Elway, Peyton Manning, Super Bowl. San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch. How much more experience can you have at the highest level of winning? To me, it's a no-brainer. If I was the Raiders, if I was the Chargers, if I was the Commanders, I would be all over Adam Peters. I'm not a victory lap guy. Because when I say something, one, it's either opinion, or two, like, I'm not a media guy. I'm not a journalist. I have a lot of information because I happen to know a lot of people in the National Football League, from assistant coaches to general managers to assistant general managers to just area scouts. And I get a lot of information. And a lot of times when I talk about football, I use their information to shape my opinion. Well, about a month and a half ago, I told everybody, it wasn't reporting. I was just telling you what I was hearing. That Wink Martindale and the defensive staff hated Brian Daboll. And the volume put a clip out. A bunch of New York blogs got it and just were calling me an idiot. A bunch of guys were like, I've never seen you at training camp. Yeah, I don't go to your training camp. Never have, never will. I don't need to go to get this information. But I just told you that they don't like the guy. And today, Wink Martindale quit, retired from the Giants, said, I'm out. I'm not working with this guy. It was clear the last month when they played in a couple national televised games. One night, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck met with them. They're like, yeah, that was kind of weird. He didn't like him. He didn't want to work with him. They fired a bunch of coaches today. All their coaches want out. The Giants have a major problem. And it's Brian Daboll interacting with his assistant coaches. I don't know Brian Daboll. I'm just being told this information. And then it was validated today. None of this stuff is like, I don't have an agenda with anything. That's one of the rare instances when I just laid out 100% what I was hearing internally about a team. And it came to fruition. I knew about it a month and a half ago. And as I said then, if you watch the moment when Daboll hands Wink Martindale the game ball, they didn't hug. Brian Daboll was making it about himself because he knew it would be on camera. That was one of the fakest moments of the National Football regular season in 2023. And it was proven today when Wink Martindale couldn't get out of there faster. He lied for the last month. Don't blame him because, he's still coaching the players. He doesn't want to have them think he quit on them because he didn't. He coached throughout the season. He just was never going to work with Brian Daboll again. Wink Martindale's good at his job, and he's going to have a lot of options. And I think, to me, him leaving is a direct reflection of Brian Daboll's ability. Part of being a head coach is more than just working with a quarterback or scheming an offense, which Daboll does not do. But it's working with your coaching staff. That is it's not easy to do. That's why good coaches are good at it. Guys that are over their head struggle with it. And clearly, Brian Daboll has a lot of maturing to do when it comes to being a head coach and managing down. Because it's easy to kiss the owner's ass that's paying you $10 million a year. Can you get along with your defensive coordinator who kind of knows what he's doing? Because to me, one of the better aspects of the New York Giants for the last couple of years has not been the offense. Their offense, like Week 18 against the gutless Eagles team, that wasn't a normal occurrence for them. But usually their defense is pretty good. Kept them in a lot of games. And Wink Martindale, I don't know exactly contractually how this is all going to work, but he'll have options. Couple other things. Just wanted to hit on some quick injury updates. I understand why they played Sam Laporta. He was trying to break a rookie record. He hurt his knee. And as Dan Campbell said today, is an outside chance to play on Sunday night. So not ideal. So I think it's fair to say, probably unlikely that Sam Laporta plays. And that sucks. And that's a major blow. That's why I told Colin on Sunday night, I can't pick Detroit until I know this guy's status. And if you tell me he's not playing and he's definitely going to be compromised if he does, let's assume he's 50%, that's a major problem. That is a huge blow for their offense because Laporta was elite this season. He looks like a superstar. So that sucks. TJ Watt. I said from the jump that this is not a successful year in Pittsburgh. It's just not. It's not because I picked him. I saw some people, you're just saying that because you picked him to win the division. No, because as the season played out, they wasted a ton of games on Mitch Trubisky. And they were in a position where they had to play everybody against the Ravens, who did not. And then their best player got hurt. And as his brother, I think, broke the news, has a grade 2 MCL sprain, who's out, who is not going to play this week. So you are missing your best player because you were forced to play him in a game that you had to win to just give yourself a chance to make the playoffs. So, and maybe, listen, he might have tried to play anyway to break a sack record, or not a sack record, but be the leader in sacks for the season. He'd already been paid. I doubt it if they were already a lock to be in the playoffs. But that is a devastating injury. Not like I would have loved Pittsburgh even if he was playing, but that sucks. Gabe Davis, who's had some incredible moments for the Bills over the years, specifically in the playoffs. Remember that Chiefs game? He would look like Jerry Rice once upon a time, but has a PCL sprain and is questionable this week. That's a pretty big blow. Jalen Hurts turned out his finger, no fracture, but clearly he's been banged up all year. His finger is pointing a different direction. Major question marks on A.J. Brown and his knee and Devontae Smith and his ankle. Obviously, to me, if Jalen's going to play, but if they can't go, losing is a possibility for the Eagles. And if losing is a possibility, if Sirianni, they started 10-1 and they finished 11-6. So he went 1-5 down the stretch. If they were to lose to Tampa Bay, I don't know, man. We've seen crazier if he got fired. I'll tell you that. Something on the draft. I think it's pretty clear. We don't know exactly. Everyone acts like Eberflus is a lock to be back. I'll believe it after a couple weeks. Not that I don't believe it, but listen, sometimes peeps, ownership and organization say something, and then Thursday of the week a guy's fired. So let's just see how this next 10 days plays out. But I do think the Bears are in an incredible position. One, obviously they're going to trade Fields. Justin Fields is not going to be on the team next year. You can't throw from within the pocket. And if you can't throw from within the pocket, you can't win big games. They lost that game yesterday because one quarterback could and the other quarterback couldn't. And the one quarterback that could is on the Packers and looked dramatically better because he is. He's a much better player than Justin Fields. Now, because of the quarterback desperation and because he still has positive things going for him, you're going to be able to trade him. I don't know exactly how much. My first inclination was a third rounder, but then what if multiple teams are bidding? Maybe you get a couple threes, maybe you get a 2 and a 3. Seems a little bold for a guy that, are you going to pay him a large contract in a couple of years? I don't know, but they would get something of value. Well, if they take a quarterback number 1 overall, they have the 9th pick in the draft, which is their own pick. Well, let's just assume 3 other quarterbacks go. So they take Caleb Williams, number one. Three other guys go between 2 and pick 8. That means that 4 other position players beside quarterbacks would be off the board. So depending on the Bears draft order, they are going to end up with the quarterback they want in this draft. I'm assuming it's Caleb Williams. It could be someone else. And then a top 5 player on their draft board. This couldn't work out any better. You're going to end up with a new upgrade at quarterback, in theory, and one of the best players in the draft. So losing that game yesterday, one, was good because we don't even need to pretend about this Justin Fields thing anymore. And two, it helped your draft position because you weren't making the playoffs anyway. You already had some positive momentum. You have a bunch of good younger defensive players. DJ Moore's a really good player. You got some young offensive linemen. But now you have the chance to get one of the best players in what looks like a pretty talented draft. Whether you go with a lineman, whether you go with one of the skill guys on the outside to pair with DJ Moore, maybe Blake, the tight end from Georgia falls to you, but you're going to have options. And you have a real chance to really improve your team. So if I'm a Bears fan, one, we'll see how this plays out with the coach and the organization, but I'm pretty excited about my options, about getting a new young quarterback, and two, getting another good, really young impact player. Because a lot of times when a team, like the last couple of years, like the Lions or the Lions last year, right? They had the high pick and they also had their own pick, but they had gone 9-8. So like one pick was like 18 and the other pick was 6, right? Remember a couple years previously, I forget the team, was it the Eagles? Was it last year the Eagles? You know, you have a pick in the single digits and another pick in the 20s. You have pick 1 and pick 9, and you just had a relatively successful second half of the season. So I would be really excited on the Lions. And last but not least, I just want to hit on something that's near and dear to my heart. Tiger Woods and Nike broke up today. I'm wearing a Nike button-up shirt that because it was the only purple thing I had in my closet, and I'm recording this before the Washington Huskies play the Michigan Wolverines. I wanted to support the Huskies because I got some money on them. But I think that partnership is one of the most important things to ever happen to business casual wear. I think it literally changed society because when Tiger got with Nike, obviously people have always worn collared shirts, but I think the high-level collared shirt, like I know in my adult life, right, in the 2000s and definitely in my professional life in the 2010s up till now, you could go into any business setting. How many people listening to this right now that, 15 years ago, that Nike polo that all the other companies copied, you wore to work? So like if you're not a suit guy at work, you could put a pair of jeans or a pair of slacks and a collared shirt on, the nice dry fit, and wear it to work and look nice. Like I don't know if that was happening in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. And that officially happened in 1996 when Tiger Woods and Phil Knight connected. And if you've read Shoe Dog, Phil Knight, to close that deal, Nike was already massive in the mid-90s. Obviously, Michael Jordan was a rocket ship. Followed Tiger Woods at his 3rd U.S. amateur. He was about to turn pro every single round for like 6 straight days. Phil Knight followed him every single hole to close that deal. And I think him and Michael are easily the 2 most important people in the history of that company. I think you could take the next 10 people in that company, LeBron's, Kobe's, tennis players. I think when you look at financially, maybe they'd add up to be the equivalent. But when you look at the cultural impact of Tiger on polo shirts and Michael on shoes, I don't think the next 20 have even close to the impact. And obviously the next 10, 20 guys have had massive impacts in the business of Nike. But I think what he did to the business casual wear in this country, I can't speak for like Italy and France, but I just know friends that work in New York and Florida and Texas and San Francisco and Arizona. And think of all these companies now, right? From Travis Matthews to Linksol to all these different polos that you might be wearing on your way to work right now listening to this, all spawned from that partnership 25 years ago. People building these brands and this apparel that's comfortable, that looks good, that you can wear on a date, that you can wear to work, that you can wear lounging around the house barbecuing. And that just, listen, when I was a kid in the early 90s, that shit didn't really exist. It wasn't, most collared shirts not only weren't comfortable, they didn't look good. And to me, Tiger changed the collared shirt just being cool, slick look. I can't imagine many of you listening don't own some sort of Nike polo in your closet. I'd be stunned if We got a lot of people that listen and watch this podcast. 90% of you. I don't care what age you are, whether you're 10 or whether you're 65. I don't care what you do for a living. I would imagine the overwhelming majority have some sort of Nike dry fit polo in the closet. Thanks, Tiger Woods. We're going to miss you at Nike.